to the latest edition of the Inside Track. We have a fantastic guest this morning, Andy King. But before we get there, just to obviously a shout out to our sponsors, FitPhone and Independent Gyms, as always. Welcome onto the podcast, Andy.
Morning, Ryan. Morning, Glenda. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. And as always, my trusty sidekick, Glenda Rivoallan. How are you doing, G?
Hi guys, lovely to see you this morning. Thanks Andy so much. It's a real privilege to have you on.
Absolutely is a privilege. I mean, let's. I guess probably the best place to start, Andy, is just to give people an understanding of who you are. I mean, most of us have followed your career, not followed your career, followed behind your career is probably the way to say. You're a big player in our industry, but some people may not know who you are. So, do you want to give us a rundown of who you currently work for, what your sort of background is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very kind. So my day job now is Chief Executive of Your Trust in Rochdale, but I also act as the GM Active Chairman as well. So GM Active, the collaboration of 12 different operators across Greater Manchester. I mean, I've been in the career, a bit like John Oxley, been in the industry for a very long time. But I suppose, quick snapshot, I used to be a drummer. Left school at 1 level, a punk drummer as well, as it comes to that. But anyway, ended up sort of trying to just avoid a day job until I was 25. So I was playing with drums and in bands, around Europe and stuff like that. And eventually thought I'd better get a proper job. So I ended up being a fitness instructor. I walked into a job centre actually, and just there was a trainee fitness instructor going, so I went and did that, did my focus level 1 and level 2 courses, and then a good friend of mine persuaded me to perhaps I should go to college and get an education, so I managed to scrape into Bedford College and met my wife there actually, but so I did that and then came out, went to work for Horsham District Council and loved that, and then I got I was convinced that Richard Branson should get into leisure, and I wrote the famous letter to Branson, and it had no bearing on what happened, but I actually managed to get the job as the first general manager of Virgin Active up in Preston.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, and it had nothing to do with my letter, but when we actually started, I was in quick stories. I was in Half Moon Street in London, where Virgin Active there's only about 3 of us employed then, and Virgin Mobile were upstairs as well. It's quite surreal. But I was in this room one day, and I was just looking through these like old filing cabinets, and there's all these letters that people had written to Branson, and I was reading them, and everyone I read, so I'm nosy. Everyone I read, I thought, bloody hell, what a great idea! I should nick that. So it was just like loads and loads of ideas. So anyway, so I worked for Virgin for a short time, opened their first club, fantastic experience, but really missed the public sector, to be honest. And I was a bit impatient being a bit later into the sector, so got the CV out, moved around a bit. But I actually did want to be back in the public sector. I did work for Fitness First at one stage as Northwest Regional Business Manager and stuff like that. So I got a bit of private sector experience and really loved that time. I've loved everything I've done, but I've moved around quite a bit. But increasingly as I get older, it's definitely the sort of service ethos and the sort of the pivot to health, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, that really sort of floats my boat and what I want to lead on.
What drew you back then from the sort of commercial? Because they are vastly different. Most of my career has been commercial. Glenda's done a bit of both. But what drew you back from that one side to go, I really wanted to be back in the public sector?
Well, I think I was on. The reason that Virgin Active generally appealed to me was because I thought the brand was right for the whole family, the whole life course, the kids all the way through, and the breadth of what could be done, and of course Virgin created these life centres, as we called them at the time, and things like that. But actually, it was too narrow a focus. It was very much a sales focus, to be honest, with other elements of the work. But I wanted the breadth, and I still do. I like the variety of what the public sector gets involved in. I remember Suzanne Ruzico, who was the sales director. She was dealing with a club transferring from the public sector into Virgin Active from a council, and she had various meetings. She said to me, "I don't know how you bloody stuck it in the public sector. They're doing me head in." And I said, "Yeah, I understand that. I understand all the politics can be incredibly frustrating, and it is. but somehow I quite like it, and actually trying to cut through the crap, basically, excuse my language, but trying to cut through that and actually get something done. So I think there's loads of stuff from the private sector background. I'd have to say, particularly Fitness First, actually, that I take into the public sector sort of sphere, and actually it does pay dividends, and you can make a big difference, I think, applying some of those private sector learnings to a public sector
But
setting.
it's changed a huge amount, isn't it, Andy, since when we first started? We're so much more commercial in the public sector than we ever were, and that's really exciting, right?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I think, Glenda. So I think you have the ability to run a business to be really efficient, but if you go too far, you end up you might as well let the private sector to get on with it then, guys. If you're not going to be actually adhering to the sort of ethos of the public sector and the service side of things. So, and it's interesting with the Sport England report that came out yesterday about the future of leisure, local authority leisure, this is. It's very much about this active well-being, active wellness, and that sort of thing. And yet you've got the situation of, like, in the drive to be efficient and to win tenders and things like that. A lot of stuff has been stripped out over the years in public sector leisure, and it's really sort of confused the picture, I think. And right now we're at that. I really welcome that report yesterday, because I think we need to redefine our purpose going forward. And for me, that's it. It is about that link to health and social care.
I think that's
and actually making sure that's the future, really.
It's a huge pattern, isn't it? That the move from fitness to wellness is starting to really take a much faster trajectory, and I think it's brilliant with the fact that public sector always understood their public health commitment. That you guys are probably ahead of the curve on the private sector and embracing the idea that wellness is part of the future of our sector, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to pick your brains on that today, but for the listeners out there, I think it would be an important place to start about the huge crisis that we have on our hands with energy at the minute, and the impact the sector. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's catastrophic. I've just come off a call with UK Active and the DCMS and Bays, because I now sit on the UK Active Council as well, and it's just catastrophic. Mark Sesman was there from GLL, and it's bleak, incredibly bleak. In terms of what support might come, obviously there's support until end of March next year, and this is something that's just going to cause havoc. In some, trying to pick any positives out of it, there will be a rationalisation of centres. That's inevitable, and some of that is overdue, and it's only sort of local politics that has kept some old knackered centres up and running, and we've been arguably too facility centric, and we've kept old facilities going when perhaps they should have been put out to pasture, and we've actually done away with development teams out in the community to save money, because they're expendable and they're not so obvious when you cut them. And that's what's happened with this sort of drive to be efficient, and it's sometimes referred to as the race to the bottom and everything else, that the purpose gets diluted because of the finances and the efficiency drives. So there's some positives in it, but that's picking at straws, really. There's going to be massive disruption, to be honest. So I think redefining our purpose and actually being part of the wellness solution is probably our only hope, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. So I think out of this pain must come the motivation for everybody to get on board, really, and that's public and private. I think the private sector can very much be involved. In fact, I think the another thing that hopefully will come out of this is the public and private will actually work closer together.
Yeah.
And I think there's examples in Europe and elsewhere where there's better collaboration between the public and private sectors, and I think that's something that's absolutely overdue. I really do.
Let's be honest, though, Andy. The private sector struggle to work with themselves sometimes. It's one big. I mean, me and Glenda talk about it quite often, in the fact that the private sector, they spend more time trying to compete with each other than they do actually trying to create a program that would drive. It's like we talk all the time about the 15% of trainer clubs and stuff like that, and how we can drive that forward. Well, the only way that moves forward is if we look at wellness programs and stuff like that, so we draw in a different population into our facilities, because at the minute we've got 15% and we're all fighting over that 15%. So new people aren't coming in, or not at the levels that they should be, and we're just going, well, I'll steal from you, I'll steal from you, you steal from me, and that's how it goes. And you're sort of going, well, surely, guys, if there's 85% out there, don't get me wrong, there's a proportion of kids, there's a proportion of infirm and aren't ever going to train with us, but it's still a very good proportion of the population that there could be, whether it be doing different activities. So is a gym the be all and end all? No. I think, and that's where I honestly believe the leisure centres and the community trusts come into it far better, because they don't just offer a gym. They offer all the other stuff, whether it be bowling, Crown Green bowling, whether it be the football pitches out the back, it's so much more that they offer the community than a private gym will ever do. But I think you're right. In order for this to happen, they need to start working closer together, and I think that's where things will come right if they do.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and one example where we could work together, which is a genuine sort of offer, really. There's in Greater Manchester, we've got this fantastic scheme called Prehab for Cancer, which is getting people fit and then recuperated after their treatment for cancer.
That's
and
amazing.
It's brilliant. So it's an amazing program led by some amazing people. And that's growing. We're on about 1,500 patients a year now, but it's gone so well. It's gone so well that, and this is funded by GM Cancer now, and it's mainstream funded. But they're talking to us now about, actually, we want to get up to approximately 20,000 people across GM. And then we're already in Cheshire, and it's Kirsty, who runs the program, is being asked to help others set it up all over the place. But we just don't have the workforce. We don't have the qualified workforce to actually cope with that 20,000. Now we're going to work with Simspa. We've got some news on that this week, whenever it was. They're going to work with us on it and try and help. But I genuinely think there's something there for the whole sector to say, look, this is an example here. It's the best one I know. It just happens to be in GM Active, but it could be anywhere. But it's a fantastic at-scale commission program that we just can't cope on our own. We need those level 4 instructors. We need more people to step forward, be they PTs or whatever.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Andy. And I think that we are at risk here, because it's very sexy at the minute to say, let's take the move from fitness to wellness. But we're in danger here of not having the very skill set and the capability in-house to deal with that. And at the risk of being a bit controversial, wellness is more complicated and it's more complex than fitness even to deliver on. So I think that you've said so far is a great message, because if we collaborate together and start with the education piece and the awareness piece, and then really build capacity through skills development. And I know you mentioned SimSpa and some of the education providers out here, but I think as a sector, we're going to not do a great job of it if we don't come together in partnership working on this, because I'm sure you would agree that the sector's not ready yet from a skill set perspective to take it on and do it justice. And Ryan, this is where I'm really, really passionate about making sure that we can upskill our existing workforce, which is really exciting for them, because it's career development at the end of the day, and really get very active about what well-being actually means.
I think the great thing as well, though, let's be honest, if we're upskilling, we can actually, and you've got programs like yours that you're saying, Andy, we can actually then start employing people again. Whereas a lot of people have been leaving the industry into freelance PT, which, yes, it has its value, but we lose great people into that freelance market. And then quite often they fail. There's not a huge retention rate on freelance PTs. They fail and they go on outside the industry to get jobs, whether that be at Tesco's and baristas or go on to bigger jobs elsewhere. But we lose them because we're forcing so much of our workforce freelance instead of into paid roles. And so if we've got programs like you're talking about, the Prehab for Cancer and things like that, and obviously the recalibrate stuff that Glenda does, we're suddenly now giving people a career option back into fitness rather than going, if you want to work in a gym, then you need to be freelance.
And again, I think that's the clarity of purpose and what we're all about. And then that might excite people, because I was just on the UK Active call, as I was saying, some of the discussions we've been having with some higher education and FE people over the last few weeks are saying, look, they're seeing people not applying for their courses. You know, they're very popular courses normally are not being popular. So already our sector's being damaged by people not wanting to go on to those courses and learn stuff. So we need to reset everything, which will bring that in. But Glenda's right, you know, that workforce development side of things is something that in GM Active we've been working on for some time. I know, you know, John Oxley told you a bit about the transformational leadership program. And that's, you know, we've just launched the 3rd and 4th cohort last night with John. So
you got 40 people on there, haven't you? Something like that, he was saying.
Yeah, 40 I think it's 41 have graduated already. We had the mayor, Andy Burnham, come along and did a you know, go out their certificates and things like that. We've had another 40 launched last night. We've got some more funding to create similar programs for sort of DM level staff and all the rest of it. And this is all about saying, if our workforce is going to be actually delivering on well-being, well, they need to be thinking and be aware of different things and be qualified in different areas as well in some cases. So there's a real transformation that's required, and it's great that Sport England have come out and said it's about active well-being, because surely to goodness, if that's the vision, if you like, then there needs to be some realization our workforce is not fit for purpose for the future. And that's what we're working on GM Active now. So hopefully, you know, we can get some momentum going on that. And when you see things like, you know, our centres are being opened up across the board to welcome people in to keep warm. You know, we're doing community type stuff. That we're talking about menopause clinics and things like in the centres. We're you know, bit by bit, we're moving more and more towards looking after the community in different ways, and that's how we've got to use our centres. You know, not just call them a well-being centre or wellness centre. What does that actually mean? And we're doing some work in GM Active to say, actually, let's try and answer that question. What does it mean for the facilities, for the workforce, for the managers to become leaders in that sort of aspect? And you know, across the board, there's a transformation that's required. And hopefully now, with the Sport England report, there'll be a bit more momentum nationally behind that as well.
I think what's really exciting, Andy, I know you mentioned, you know, that we need people that have more advanced qualifications, and you're absolutely right. You know, they need to have areas of specialism, areas that you just mentioned, you know, the cancer areas, menopause, they're all specialists, and absolutely we need those level 4 instructors. But what I get really excited about is for the average person who has potentially used their facilities in the past and maybe not even using them at the minute or never used them, it's basic lifestyle change. And that might be something as simple as they're not coming in and using your gym facility because they've just had a new baby and they're not getting any sleep. And some really simple but strong lifestyle support could make all of the difference. And the great thing about that is we have got the workforce that we can upskill into that area that doesn't demand them going on long qualifications. It could be a really short, very specific training program that allows these people to move into that wellbeing lifestyle piece that would really open up our retention and attrition numbers. And I think that's really exciting. And
it is.
If we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Exactly. And you know, you're absolutely spot on. And what we launched the GM Active College a couple of years, well, probably 3 years ago now, with a view to saying every aspect, every position that we've got in our centres and in our development teams, they're all going to need some training. So we work with Future Fit, I think you know, with a digital platform. And again, the idea is to upskill all of our staff in different things. So if you take the NHS, making every contact count, we've got a version of that. So our receptionists are looking out for different things, and it is complex. It is a long-term game. It's not something you just say, well, go on a weekend's training course and we're sorted. Far from it. But it's then the more we do of that, of course, what's happening is that our commissioners, both at local level and regional level, are going, you guys are getting this. You're understanding this. You're putting time and investment. You're writing strategies that suggest that you do understand this. So then they engage with us and they start to commission us some more things. You know, we've got in Rochdale, we've got two major programs for mental health. One is #Thrive for children and young people. So before they get to CAMS, they go into this program, and it's just going so. Unfortunately, it's so popular because the demand is so great of young people with mental health problems. So we've got that, and we've also got another one for the primary schools, and mentally healthy schools. So we go into all the schools and work on that. That is not traditional sort of leisure centre work, but we're doing increasingly more and more of it. And that's probably where we need to be focusing and making sure we've got, again, the staff development to cope with that and to cater for demand.
And how does this filter out into the rest of the UK, Andy? I mean, obviously, by the sounds of it, you guys are doing amazing work up in that sort of Greater Manchester area. But I guess the one thing that we've always had thrown at probably the fitness industry as a whole, and probably was very prevalent when we were trying to get funding from the government during the pandemic and so on, and they were like, no, we'd rather give it to the pubs. That we're not one coherent industry, because we're really poor at that, I think. But how does this then filter into? It's all right, you guys doing this great work up there, and I think it's, by the sounds of it, you are, and the stuff we see is amazing. But then, what about Shropshire? What about the rest of the country? To take what you guys are doing and going, okay, this is working for us, guys. How do then we filter that out? Is that through UK Active? Is it simple? How do we take that message to the greater?
It's a great question, Ryan, and one that we've been pondering, because people get sick of hearing about GM and this and GM that. I'm sure they do, and we're very, very aware of that. And we know there are lots and lots of pockets of good things. There's lots of stuff that go on in Rochdale that I could tell you about for the next 2 or 3 hours that just happens, but we're a bit rubbish at telling people about it. So the first thing we're doing in GM is we've got a little bit of funding to work with Salford University. They're going to help us capture, first of all, in GM, the next pre-ad for cancer, if you like, because there's loads. So they're going to work with us on that and do a bit more work. But also, what's going to happen, my understanding on the back of the report that came out yesterday and the discussion we've just had this morning with DCMS, is the DCMS are going to do a review. They're going to look at facilities, so they're definitely going to do a facility review in light of the energy crisis and everything else, but just to see about the rationalisation. Again, we're doing a similar study in Manchester right now, but they're also going to look at the purpose of leisure going forward, and they've already been up to see us, and I know they've been elsewhere in the country. There's some great stuff going on elsewhere, but it's uncovering it and capturing that, and then saying and then put it together as a coherent plan, basically. So that I think the time is now to say there's us a lot doing stuff. There's Warren down south doing stuff. There's pocket of examples.
It's who oversees that, I guess, Andy, is the challenge. It's like they brought out their obesity plan, didn't they? And that to be fair, it looked very much like a PR exercise. We're going to do this. We'll get Boris running a little bit. Look what we're doing for obesity. Then it just disappears under the carpet. We don't really have to push it. So
we've been. Well, I'll talk about me. I've been quite critical of our bodies from time to time, including UK Active. So I've just agreed to go on their membership council, to be honest. And Steve Scales is leaving, isn't he, and everything else. So I think there's change. So either we keep, I suppose, being moan about the fact that there's nobody sort of capturing this, or we try and get involved. And I think with the problem I think there's been for some time is that everybody's a membership. Community Leisure UK is a membership, so they can only represent their members. They don't represent the whole sector. So the only real people that do, arguably, is Sport England, and they've got vested interest, and they have to watch what they say.
And that's always been my argument. I mean, I've always been quite vocal, and Glenda knows. But they all, don't get me wrong, I do believe they all play their part, and UK Active have done some great stuff, SimSpot done some great stuff, and EM does. But we don't have the overarching, and I don't necessarily think we need an overarching body that goes, right, you're doing it wrong, you need to stick to these rules. But we don't have that body that, and Stephen will actively say, and he said on our podcast, we represent our members.
Yeah.
We're not there to represent the whole industry, although we get put forward to speak to government. UK Active is a membership organisation, and that's what it does. So it's very difficult to then go blame them for then not driving our message in government. Because technically, they look after the 1,000, 2,000, whatever his members they've got. That's their job. And so we do need, somehow we need to sort of take it, whether we bring everything together, SimSpy UK, all into one thing, or they create something new and go, this is what we're going to do to allow us to drive forward, because we're not coherent as an industry.
And I think the opportunity is going to present itself now in this review. I hope it is anyway. And I think we need to just not be reliant. So it's a step forward that those bodies you mentioned and others have come together. The report is published by Sport England, but it's got everybody. They're very clear in the action plan at the back that who's going to be doing what from the different bodies. But I still think there needs to be some operator. I would say this, but I'm an operator. But there needs to be some. There needs to be some operators here who are actually doing the do right now, who can actually say, look, can we just put the niceties aside and actually get into the nitty gritty here, because this is what needs to happen. And I hope that's the opportunity that's going to present itself through this DCMS review. I hope it is, but we can only hope. And as I say, some of the things. Sorry, Glenn. One of the discussions that we did have when DCMS paid a visit to Greater Manchester and we met with them was they did say about, where does the private sector stop and this public sector take over and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's a valid challenge that we need to talk about, as we mentioned earlier. How can the private sector play a role? I know in the city of Manchester, which I'm joining actually in February, I'm switching jobs from Rochdale into the city of Manchester. I know they have an approach and a website in effect that invites all providers of physical activity to go onto one website to make it easier for the customer to source the opportunities that are out there across the city of Manchester. Maybe that's the answer going forward, or the part of the answer.
Andy, I was just going to say, with the fact that you mentioned how bleak the crisis on energy is, and we know that, we have, there's been a lot coming out over the last few weeks that we're not fully back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of memberships across the sector. I just wondered what you think are the key things that you could give advice on that people are going to have to tackle it pretty quickly, right? Because unless we do something, I think you're right, we can all have a little whinge about what bodies or the government not helping us, etc. But at the end of the day, by the time we get to the point where we're satisfied with that, the horse is already bolted. So I just wondered, from a strategic perspective, what you think has to be the priorities to survive this next challenge, and it is a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to ask, but I think unless you've got some support from wider bodies. So again, one of the things that we're helping our managers to do in transformational leadership could apply to a small gym or an independent, and that's saying, look, you're part of a system whether you know it or not. And I know John Oxley said the same, and he that's what he goes through. So he's, you say, what do you mean by that? And it's like, well, there's lots of people and lots of organisations, whether it's corporate business. There could be a system there. If you're not plugged into that, then there's a great opportunity, as you well know. But the wider, from the GP surgery down the road to the way that health are increasingly understanding that physical activity is something that they should be partnered with. They've never been so open to working with us, to be honest with you. So if you're not aware of the system that you are currently sat in, then you're missing a trick, because there's lots of different organisations that you can work with, and you need to identify them, and you need then to identify the people that you need to go and knock on their doors. And I think increasingly you'll be welcome to actually say, how can I work with you? And in Rochdale we get roughly £2 million worth of external funding outside of anything else, because we become a trusted partner of various parts of the system, and it's all sorts of things. So I think those that are doing it will sort of go, this is how you need to be making those connections. So that's the first one. The second one, energy consumption. I'm sure everybody's doing this, but seriously be collaborating on what works and what doesn't. I've seen so much money wasted on things that just don't work. Because we're all learning the same independent lessons, which is madness. So we've got to really understand what actually does work, and you have to be on it. Just like a sales process, your energy consumption has to be treated the same on a daily basis and drive it down. And I'm sure we can all do far better than what we've done up to now on that. So that'll be my two things: the system, the collaboration, and the day-to-day focus on energy.
Andy, you mentioned, what's come through so strongly in the last half an hour is your ethos around community, and collaboration. And that came through, didn't it, Ryan, really strongly when we were chatting with John. And, that ethos that you're embedding within your leadership, that at the end of the day, leadership is going to drive through the entire culture of the organisation. And I just wonder, even in private sector, why there's not been more collaboration from public health to what we do. And I think that's also a huge opportunity, because we do have a huge impact on public health. And then the other one that I think we miss a trick on is corporate wellbeing, because it's quite incredible that corporates that are within your community sometimes end up going to a private provider that are not even from our sector. They might be wellbeing generically across corporate organisations, when actually the local leisure facility could be very well placed to deliver a corporate wellbeing programme. And I just wonder why we've not cracked that.
I think the first thing with the health colleagues, we can ask them now. Particularly it's been amazing to work with some of the clinical staff that are involved with pre-alpha cancer, and it's very clear. It's the approach, it's the mindset that we've got in, and if it just smells like we're just after some money, some commission, they sense that, and they look at the organisation that you represent. And do they see evidence that we're actually embedded in the community? If they do, then I think they're prepared to work with us increasingly. If they just think you're after a quick buck, quite frankly, which
that's where
I've been guilty of that in the past. Let's go into health. They must have some money.
GP referral collapsed, didn't it, in a lot of private places, because it was all about the money rather than the actual thing, and it only really works in the community leisure facilities.
Yeah, and again, it might sound like that it can't work in private. I massively believe it can work in the private sector. I really do. And things like NHS health checks. Why on earth are they only available in pharmacies? And there's a few of us that operate them and offer them. It's because there's a commission, there's money attached to it. So GP surgeries get 25 quid, or they used to, probably more now.
Is that right?
And what do? You go in, you get a little bit of information. It takes about 5 minutes. They get 25 quid. You get a little slip of paper. Why on earth are they not in our wellbeing centres? So
well, if you look at the likes of Bupa,
should be done by us.
Well, Bupa, and I do a lot of work with Vitality, and all of theirs are Virgin Active do most of theirs. So if a private medical company, insurance company, is happy to accept Virgin, it has their, there is no reason why any business couldn't do it. You need the tools to say these are the guidelines. That pretty much is all you need to do. Most people, if they're level 3 qualified, can do most of the tests that those insurance companies or the NHS would want.
Absolutely. I mean, Bupa, I'm that old. I can remember Bupa many years ago, used to actually sponsor the Phytech platform, and we used to deliver them down in Horsham District Council. We used to deliver those and take the pin pricks and do the cholesterol testing. So if we could do it 2 decades ago, it's probably even more than that now. I don't know. It's why can't it be done? And I think it's interesting because we talked about, private sector bringing things into the public sector. Well, the public sector can now bring a lot of stuff into the private sector if they're willing. So I predict that is what will happen. There will be a sort of bit of a merging together here as a sector, which has its pitfalls and has its challenges, definitely. Different ethoses and everything else, not for profit, for profit, whatever. But I think we've got to get over some of that and actually present a whole picture to the commissioners and the health commission. Say, look, this is an army of people who are passionate about getting people fitter and healthier. We can help, and this is how we can do it.
I think. Sorry, Glenn. I was just going to say it's a matter of getting the right people involved in driving that forward. I think, Andy, is the key with this. It's a matter of getting the right people. Because I know loads of people in the private sector. We've been talking to quite a few, haven't we, recently, Glenda? I mean, Glenda's just for one. I mean, obviously with what she does, but there's loads of other people in the industry. Funny enough, I was talking to James Griffiths at while training this morning. And it is all about improving the quality of one of the training to the standards in our industry and getting people fit and healthy. And people want to do that. Not all of them are rented treadmill facilities that just want to make money. There are a lot of private, like the Leisure Trust, that genuinely want to have an impact on people's lives. We're just not getting that message out there to get everyone together to come up with a coordinated plan to go, this is how we're going to do it, guys. And then I think we do need government back, not backing necessarily. Do we need their finances? Not, I don't necessarily think we do. But I think you need one group of people to go, right, this is how we do it, and then we push it out into the wider business to get people involved.
We are. There's a number of us talking about how we can actually capture. You asked it, earlier on. What about everybody else who's not in GM-active type thing? And we know there's lots of examples out there, both public and private. Actually, we'll know more about the public than the private. But we're thinking of whether we actually put something on, possibly with Elevate conferences, and say, look, let's have a specific thing on this. And invite people to come and actually tell each other and to network and actually have this so we can start to uncover what's going on and give people a platform to share it. So it won't be GM Active, telling about how good we are, but it'll be GM Active, here's what we've got, a few examples. What have you got? Let's show and tell. And actually, we get some commissioners in the room as well, then who knows what might come out of that. So.
Yeah. That's really exciting. Andy, I was just wondering, because obviously I've followed your journey and I know how much work you've done in terms of transformation, and you don't just do all that hard process and practice work without a reason for doing it. What have you seen in the KPIs of the organisation that you could share with us? From all of the activities that you've been doing, what's been the real impact that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's the driver. I mean, the first thing you do is make sure that what you take on from a commission point of view is sustainable, and that there's a margin in there. Which, again, when you're talking to commissioners, they sometimes have to be, well, why do you need a margin? It's, well, because there's an overhead that we have to pay for. But when you get enough of them, when you get enough of those with maybe a 5% overhead in there, the margin in there, then it starts right up and helps your overall sort of head office costs, if you like, and your team's costs and things like that. But the knock-on effect is, I think that, if you look at, I've got a good friend who runs Active Tameside, which is probably one of the best trusts in the country in terms of wellbeing and wellness, and it was set up by Mark Tweedy years ago, another sort of genius really on this sector.
Yeah, I've been speaking to Mark.
I mean, Mark's brilliant. Chris has taken it on, and what Chris has done really is take that wellbeing model and he made some fundamental changes. So he basically used his private sector background. He used to be a director in Living Well, and said, right, all of these GP referrals of the various different types that come in, social prescribing might call it as well now. And he made some changes to what happens to them at the end of it, of their referral, 12-week program, whatever. And get him on to tell him yourself, but it just made a massive difference in terms of retention. And there's a great business to be had there, which we've all sort of known, but never done enough about it, I don't think. So I think, there is a value, a monetary value in getting involved in the right things to increase the population's health. There really is, to help make us all sustainable. And, again, go back full circle back to the energy. Never have we needed to be, very good at generating income from the right areas that we want to work in and support the population. So that would be my sort of place on that.
I think what's really also came through for me, when you were talking about community, but I guess I'm a little bit of a nervous character at the minute around the connection engagement piece, because I feel like, from the aftermath of what we don't really like talking about anymore, because it's all about positivity for the future. I think we've got challenges around connection and engagement. And I think if we can look at our solutions from more a community perspective, where we're bringing people together, it's got to be a win-win.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, what jumps into my mind again is like things like the menopause cafes and stuff like that. There's a load of things out there, the kids that are going through the roof with anxiety and stuff like that. There's all these things that we know. We're not selling baked beans here. We're selling stuff that works. we're selling physical activity, and it's across the piece. So there are the opportunities, you're right, to look at how can we engage with the communities that perhaps we've taken for granted or not even bothered with before, but it's beginning to happen more and more and more. And I'll tell you what, most of that is because of the COVID hangover, where lots of our teams in the public sector, and I'm sure there's lots of stuff that went on in the private sector as well, but I'm more aware of the public sector. Our teams got asked to go and work in the community and work alongside local authority officers in all sorts of other areas. And that's forged some real bonds, and they've realised, blimey, you lot can actually help us on a lot more things now, can't you?
Yeah.
And that's what's happening.
I think the strange thing, Andy, as well, which is quite interesting, is, and I've always felt this, the roles in which we put our staff into in facilities, whether they be public or private, give them a skill set that I think is so transferable into so many other areas. So I know loads of staff that have gone on, built a career up to 25, whatever, gone into another industry and just dropped in like that. When other industries find it a lot harder, they get quite easily pigeonholed into a sort of thing. Because our staff can do operation, they can do sales, customer service, and they've got such a great thing. So when you guys probably helped out with COVID, it was actually quite normal for them to go in because they're very personal people. So they have that customer service element, whatever they were doing. And operationally, they were just able to adapt. And so I can imagine there were some of the best staff that went along to help simply because they've got this great grounding in what they do for a job. So I'm just going to go on to one point, though, which do you think sometimes, and this is to your credit to deal with this, but do you think sometimes that maybe the private sector sort of look at the public sector in the sense of that's their job? So community-wise, they sit there and go, well, we're commercial, we do this, everything else is theirs. And then do you think that sort of attitude needs to change a little bit to bring the industry together a bit more?
Yeah, I do. I mean, hopefully that's not the case. It probably is, though, Ryan. That's why you've asked the question. But I think that's really missing a trick. And certainly, go back to my Virgin Active days. That was something that we wanted to reach out really, and cut out the admin and all the sort of I suppose the sort of, I hate to say it, the David Lloyd type feel of it. It was like, no, this is for everybody. This is for your family, and we'll look after you from cradle to grave type thing. So I think if the private sector, if people in the private sector are thinking that's what they do, well, fine, but you're missing a trick, quite frankly. And I think it wouldn't take too much for you to understand how you can get involved. It might seem like a daunting task to actually, go out your comfort zone and start to think, how do I engage with health and with those parts of the community that I've not been engaged with? I get that. And that's where, ideally we could help really, and go from there.
And I think that, with my wellbeing hat on, I think it's really important that we understand that people in different life chapters have got different needs and requirements. So you mentioned a lot today, Andy, the menopause. I am in that chapter of my life. And sometimes it would be really good to work with someone and hear from someone that's got a shared experience. And I think we've got a mega opportunity there because there's a lot of females and males that are out of work who are looking for type roles where they might only do 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week. And I think that we need to be much more open in our recruitment to try and re-engage that part of the workforce into our sector.
Couldn't agree more. Being of a certain age myself, I think there's all sorts of recruitment opportunities, as you suggest there. Definitely, I'm smiling as well because we actually did hold a menopause cafe with Graham Hind from LFX, and one of the ladies who came along. Cut a long story short, we're going to end up employing her in Rochdale because she's volunteered at the menopause cafe that we've carried on, and she's actually brilliant. And she's come to the end of her sort of career. She doesn't need to earn the big bucks anymore. So I've got this fantastic lady who's going, look, I want to get involved. Brilliant. Come on in. So yes, I couldn't agree more. I
quite like it because my local club is Craven Leisure Centre. So I don't go to a private club. I go to the leisure centre, and the staff. The difference in the staff model versus a lot of private clubs is huge. You go into private clubs, tend to be very young. Even the managers tend to be under 30. Very young clubs, and that's the feel of it. You go into most leisure centres, and this may be just my experience, but you get a broad base from the almost retired on reception saying hello and whatever, all the way through to, and it really is a broad base at the club I go to. They've got the youngsters there, the 18, 19-year-olds delivering, but they've also got the gym instructor and whatever this in their 40s. And it's really, it's nice to see. I mean, I put a post on LinkedIn a few months back about going, because I go usually on Friday morning, 8:30, and it's I sort of call it geriatrics hour, because it's for the old people in the gym, and then me that's getting that way. And it's really interesting because you don't see that in a lot of private clubs. So because of the staff they employ and the environment it obviously encourages that sort of member, which is fantastic, and it's great to see. Yeah. And maybe something to learn, or the private sector could learn from that in the sense that you don't need to be a 21-year-old with big muscles to be a gym instructor, because that doesn't really relate to most of the people that want to join. It doesn't relate to the baby boomers and those people that are 50 pluses. It just doesn't. People don't want to train with that. They want people that are like themselves.
It's about the empathy, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely spot on. I think you do see that, and it's a bit like B&Q, isn't it? There could be a recruitment campaign there. I think the other side of it as well is the diversity. I don't think we're quite there yet. Certainly I speak for ourselves in Rochdale. We're not where we want to be on the sort of diversity of our workforce. So there's still more work to do on that, without a shadow of a doubt. And to build that empathy, not because it's just the right thing to do, because it is, but actually, if you do that, then you've got more empathy, and it's good business to be empathetic to the people you're trying to attract in. Simple as.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Guys, I'm just conscious of time, and I've sort of got one last thing to ask you, Andy. The fact that you are about to move from Rochdale to Greater Manchester, I'm sure you've got the 100-day plan scribbled out for the first 100 days. So we want, share what that's going to look like. What's it like being in shoes for the next 100 days?
Well, it's so I'm moving from Your Trust Rochdale into the city of Manchester, so MCR active. So it's a bit confusing, all these actives and Manchester and all the rest of it. But it's quite a different beast, to be honest, Glenn. It's about connections more than anything else. Somebody said to me, it's almost like the GM active role I do as chair, but in the city of Manchester. So it's going to be very, very, very different. There's lots of partners to get around and to understand. So I'll be doing the seek to understand before being understood bit in those first 100 days, and just trying to get a full understanding of what the crack is. But yeah, I mean, Manchester's fantastic. I've been involved in Manchester City on and off for 20 years. With I was ops director at Serco, and we were there. Then GLL later on, I was Northern regional director for GLL, and we had the Manchester contract, stuff like that. So I know a lot of the people. They're fantastic people, as they are.
You've got a great mayor as well as that. I think that's what helps with Manchester. I think you've got. Yeah. I did a bit of work up there, private club, but just the stuff that goes on in Manchester is driven by the mayoral office. So you've got all that, and you've got the Chamber of Commerce that works really closely. All the business community and everything. It just seems to work in that city. I don't know what they've done differently, but they do seem to have it right, which is good.
I think you're right. There's a lot of collaboration in our sector. Great sport. I think we're very lucky with the people that we've got in Greater Sport and the active partnership there. And we work as GM Active. We work with them really, really well, and they help us connect into other people in the system. So there is something a bit special there. But again, we're keen to say that there's still loads of things we want to do better and different. And everything we do, we try and think, where can we learn from other people, and where can we share what we're doing? So hopefully, as a sector, we all move along together. That's the approach.
Well, hopefully, from this podcast, we can get some people to start reaching out and going, what are you guys doing there that we can bring to? Because I think that's the key with things like this, is to sort of go, okay, that's the message. Now get in touch with Andy to say, obviously, what I don't want to do is add to your workload. I mean, that's not But the key is to try and get people to reach out and go, if we can pick up that Greater Manchester GM Active and go, let's drop it somewhere else, in the sense of most of what they do, then fantastic, because then we start growing these regions, and it just expands, doesn't it? Everything seems to go right.
It's interesting with the Pre-Ad for Cancer. Just mention that again. You know, Kirsty, who runs the program for us, is almost permanently now doing that role for that particular program. You know, because people are doing that. So yeah, and equally, people have got things they think that we could learn from. Then we want to hear them. And as I say, the idea of some sort of conference on this, specifically on this pivot to health, if you like, is something that be interesting to know if people think that's something they'd like to attend and will get some value out of.
Extremely well received. I'm doing a huge amount of calls at the minute, Andy, with leisure trusts, private operators that all understand that there is this movement from fitness to wellness, but they also understand it's a journey and it's not a quick one. And I think they also, and it's came through so strongly today, that our leisure solutions are not a one size fits all. And if there is ever a time to segment your audience, this is it, right? And deliver across a range of wants and needs, but it's critical even more than ever that we really, really understand our customer, right? And I think that you've demonstrated that beautifully on behalf of the sector. I'd like to thank you for all the amazing good practice work that you do, and the fact that you work so hard in getting the message out and representing us in a way that makes us feel positive about the future. So thanks for that, Andy.
Well,
absolutely. One final question that we ask everybody, Andy. So other than your family, because we know family is always a big inspiration to people, so we take that as a given. And if it's not, then best to keep it quiet. Is there someone either out in our industry, or someone you read or follow, or that sort of inspires you to do what you do, or you can take some really good learnings that it's worth other people having a look at?
I've mentioned him already, Mark Tweedy. I think
we like Mark. We like him. We were chatting to him a couple of weeks ago.
I don't know how many years ago it was now, but what Mark did in Tameside, I went to college with Mark, so I've known Mark for many years, but his story actually is amazing, and what he managed to set up with no blueprint, no template from anybody else, in Tameside. This is, for anybody listening who doesn't know, then it's fantastic, and Mr. Rushton, Chris Rushton, good friend of mine, who's taken it on as well. I just think that those two basically, but Mark's sort of vision in the early days, I think, is amazing. So Mark's my man, basically.
Well, Mark's on the podcast in early January, isn't he, Glenda? So we will definitely pick his brains about his work in Tameside. So I can't thank you enough for coming on, Andy. I really appreciate your time this morning. If anybody does want to get in touch with Andy, we will get all his contact details will be at the end of the podcast. So absolutely jump on there and send Andy a message. Obviously, he's keen to speak to people. So we will do that, and I'm sure we will get you on again once you've settled into your new role. And you've got some more great stuff to tell us. But good luck with the Pre-Ad for Cancer. That sounds an amazing program you're doing. And obviously, if we can support that in any way, just let us know. And obviously, we'll push it out to our network as well. So just let us know.
Right, thanks both.
The new start. Really looking forward to all about it.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
right, let me just end recording.